Welcome to Belonging at the Top, driving performance through people. The podcast where leadership gets real and people come first. Your hosts are Dr. Natalie Parks, psychologist, behavior analyst, best-selling author, and your go-to expert for dismantling systems of injustice while building equitable, high-performing teams. And Anthony Butler, leadership coach, thought leader, speaker, and master of helping leaders unlock their team's full potential, one breakthrough at a time. Together, they're here to tackle your toughest leadership challenges with just the right mix of science, strategy, and a sprinkle of humor. In this episode, Natalie and Anthony discuss the concept of microaggressions and provide insight on what they are, how they present at work, and tips on how to address them when they reduce the psychological safety of a team member.
Welcome back to another episode of Belonging at the Top with your host, Dr. Natalie Parks, and myself, Anthony Butler. Natalie, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I can't complain. We'll let the folks in on a little secret. This is take 2 of a podcast. Y'all, we recorded a whole episode with no sound.
Whole episode. It was a good one, too.
Good one. Had video. We were outside. We were doing something new, and it didn't work out.
It didn't work out. So much for trying new things.
Actually, I think the new sound was a microaggression that we did against ourselves.
We microaggressed ourselves. We canceled ourselves out.
We grieved ourselves. Yes, that is hilarious. So, folks, if you couldn't tell, that's the topic of today's episode. We're going to be talking about microaggressions, what they mean, how to deal with them, etc. So, Natalie, you want to define microaggression? You want to kick us off? Dr. Parker?
Sure, we'll kick us off. So microaggressions is one of those fun things that we probably hear talked about a lot, but we don't always define super well. I am going to lead it off with one of the pet peeves, at least of some of my friends. One friend, I'll give her the shout out early in the episode, Beverly Kirby, is that there's a lot of subjectivity when we talk about microaggressions, right? We tend to focus on how did you feel? How did you interpret what I said? It doesn't really matter how I meant it, but it matters how you received it. And I will stand on that if I say something that results in your harm and you tell me you're harmed, it doesn't matter if I meant to hurt you or not. I hurt you and we should figure that out. But let's put a pause on that one and I'll answer the question, which is, what is a microaggression? So microaggression is a statement that is made from one person to another that is, it illustrates bias that you likely had about that person based on one of their demographics, whether it's a observed demographic or a stated group membership or something like that. And it is typically posed as a compliment, but not always. Sometimes it's posed as a curiosity. But it illustrates that you had a negative bias about that person and you're somehow surprised or somehow your interaction with them is different than what you expected.
Yep. Can I add to your definition?
No.
That
is it.
No, I think my addition is it's not just a statement, it's a behavior as well, right? And so I think, yes. And the behavior can also be either intentional or unintentional. And I think the key point, or I call the bitter pill of microaggressions, and a lot of this happens at work, it can happen socially as well, but the bitter pill, meaning that you have to accept it, you might not like it, and understanding the definition, is that it is not how you would think about your behavior and your statements. It's how your behavior and your statements are regarded by the person who's been aggrieved, right? The person who is listening to whatever you're saying, the person who views your behavior towards them. So the behavior example would be, and I'll say, and I think to also illustrate that it doesn't have to always be a compliment. It can be something that's just the behavior you do that in your mind might be benign, but it illustrates a bias towards someone else. So right. You hear folks talk about like being followed in stores, especially people of color, right? So if that's something you do innately because you've been told that, oh, watch those people, they tend to steal, and then you end up following them in the store, and that person notices you following them in the store, that's a microaggression. It's an example of an intentional microaggression, meaning they are doing the act on purpose, but their intent is not to discriminate. Their intent is not to harm, but it still happens anyway, right? And so I think that's where the regarded as being discriminatory or being a bias is where it comes in, where people, if you were probably to challenge them, like, oh no, I'm just doing that because it's my job. And we have loss prevention and we got to make sure that folks aren't stealing and yada, yada, which is all accurate, but it's that whole thought process and the targeting is built in bias. So I think that's an example. Or whether it be crossing the street when you see people who make you uncomfortable as you're walking down the street, you're getting in an elevator, you cross your purse, you bring your kids closer because whatever you saw says danger, right? And that could be hair, dress, dirt, smell, whatever it may be. It doesn't always have to be based in race and gender, but whatever made you uncomfortable, that still can be considered a microaggression. I think that's another nuance of it as well that makes it harder for people to really understand, not to understand it, but to kind of to address it, is that I can say one thing to you, Natalie, because we've got a 20 plus year relationship as friends. I can say the same thing to somebody I don't know, and they'd be like, "What the hell you just say?" It could be a microaggression because I don't have that context with them, and I don't have that history with them. I don't have that relationship with them. So I think, just to kind of clarify my additions, right? It's behavior and or speech that can be intentional and or unintentional that is regarded as discriminatory toward the person who received it.
Yes, I do want to dig in a little bit more because I think that is one of the sticking points or the sticky points of the definition is, how do I know that something is going to be regarded as a microaggression? And as I referenced before, my friend Beverly and I have had so many conversations about this because it makes it hard if you're trying to train people or teach people how to not engage in microaggressions if they don't know. Like, I don't know what the difference is between you and the next person that maybe I'm both friends with, but you don't take offense and the other person does. How do I know? And so I think one of the things that you said is context. Context is everything. And I'm going to mess this up, but there is a man who is very well known who actually has done a speech, and the clip of the speech that I'm thinking about, somebody in the audience said they were talking about the N-word, which saying the N-word is not a microaggression. That is a racial slur, just to be very clear about that. But they said I have friends who sing it in songs, and I'm not sure how to explain that. And he provides a conversation and an explanation that puts everything into context. So the first example that he gives is that he calls his wife hun, or some other term of endearment. And it's okay that he calls his wife hun, but if he was walking down the street and saw three ladies pass by him and said, "Hey, hun," that would be a problem. And we can all understand that very easily. If I was walking with my husband and some woman walked up and he was like, "Oh, hey, hun," or "Hey, babe," I would probably have a problem with that, right? The context is, I would most definitely, but trying to make myself sound a little nicer than I am. But we would most definitely have an issue. And everyone can understand why that would be, right? Whether that woman knows that I'm his wife or not, if that woman doesn't know him, and they have this exchange, we could all assume that they should probably know, or at least they should accept the feedback if they didn't know. So it's the context, right? You and I know each other very, very well. We can joke with each other and have conversations that we can't have with complete strangers because there's context, right? And so what I would say is, one, if you don't know somebody that well, assume that the context is going to be that what you say is going to be interpreted with a bias because you don't know them and because you don't have the context of their background or where they come from or those types of things. And I can tell you, as someone who often probably grew up not understanding the context of who I am as a white woman in a primarily Black space, now that I am acutely aware of kind of who I am and who I present as a white woman, I understand there is a context when I enter spaces that people don't know who I am, what my history is, how I grew up, the way I think and see and view the world. And so there are assumptions, whether they're right or wrong. That's not really the argument. There are assumptions that are going to be made.
Right.
And so there are things that I cannot say in new spaces that I say with my friends daily.
Right.
right? And that requires me having that context.
I think the opposite is true too. People will say things to you and with you in those new spaces, not knowing your context either, right? Not knowing what your family composition is, not knowing what your social life is like. They might feel comfortable thinking they have the context and the familiarity, and then to have you respond like, "What the hell you just say to me?" Right? That is right. That is a thing. So, and I think that is, and I think the thing with microaggressions is that we all do them. I don't care what level you think you are on your diversity journey and how well you think you are and how empathetic you think you are. We all do and say things because we don't have context, because we're always in new situations, right? So it could be regional. So I'm going to use your same example of a hun and baby. Saying hun in St. Louis or calling somebody hun in New York or DC, somewhere else, is kind of strange. Now, you go down to South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and you say hun, baby, that's everyday regular talk. So context is, again, I want to make sure that we're clear there. It's not just about race and gender. Context is socioeconomic, it's geographic. There are things that you have to be aware of that people may take offense to or may not take offense to. So again, if you are that person coming from the South where it's more familial, more relaxed, and you use honey, baby, child, whatever in your everyday conversation, you will be shocked to find as you go north that people don't talk that way. And so you may find yourself
and get offended by it.
And they're getting offended by it. And you like, I don't understand what's wrong with this girl, because all I said was da-da-da-da-da. And people looking at you like, yeah, that's the problem, is what you said. Vice versa. Folks who are coming down from the north to the south, again, will be always offended because you just going to get gas in a restaurant, you at Waffle House, whatever it is, and you're going to be called honey, you're going to be called babe, whatever that term of endearment is. It's not really just a term of endearment; it's a literal greeting. That's it. Right. It's just a greeting, but there's some context in that greeting. So I think that is. Right. I like to use that example because it kind of takes away from the hot topics of race and gender, just to show that language can be, when taken out of a geographical context or regional context, can be considered a microaggression outside that region. Right. So I think that's another way of looking at it. I think you had an example too. Talk about your walking down the street getting hit example. I don't want to steal your thunder.
Well, it's not my thunder. I got this again from Beverly. She was reading a book. I believe it is the So You Want to Talk About Race book, but I will make sure that I get that right and put it in our notes after the show. But she actually said this kind of helped her better understand microaggressions and get over that point where it's so subjective. And the book gave the example of, let's just say you're walking down the street, right? And as you're walking down the street, Anthony, you and I are walking down the street together. And every 5 to 30 seconds, it's completely unpredictable, somebody just punches you. Sometimes it kind of hurts. Sometimes it's just annoying. No big deal. But you don't say anything because you can't, because you don't know where they're coming from. And they just randomly kind of happen. And we get to the end of the street, to the corner, and somebody is talking real wild with their hands. Like they're very animated. Their hands are going everywhere. And as they're talking, their hand flails out and punches you in the arm. And they punch you right where a bruise was left as you were walking down the street. And you're like, yo, why did you just punch me? And this is where you finally say something, or you get angry, or whatever the response is. And the person, so I'm going to pause here. Number one, let's understand that you're not just reacting to that one individual instance, right? You're not reacting to the one microaggression that this one person did. You're reacting to the fact that you just walked 3 blocks and people were randomly punching you from out of nowhere. And because it was coming from all sides and all angles, you also had nobody you could be specifically mad about or mad at. You couldn't correct anyone until now, finally, here is the visible person. Right. Right. And you react because they hit you in a bruise that was just left. Right. But their response is, I'm animated and it's a free country and I can talk with my hands. And maybe you should have watched out for my hands instead of me hitting you, i.e., why you so sensitive? Right? And it was just one little thing. I didn't leave the bruise on you. It's not my fault. My intention was not to hit you, so why are you so upset about it? These are all the things that we hear, but we can, again, easily understand that even if I'm talking with my hands in a very animated way, if I reach out and smack someone, it doesn't matter if I meant to smack them or not.
Right.
I smacked them, and I should accept that they might have hurt and say sorry. And if I don't realize that I smacked them and they say, why did you just smack me? My response shouldn't be, well, I didn't intend to smack you. I can talk with my hands. It's a free country, all of these things, right? And I didn't understand that if I talked with my hand, it might reach out and smack you.
Right.
Those are the things that I think make it a little more concrete and a little more understandable. And it's again, I think sometimes when we can put them in context of very clear, I was going to say black and white, but then I'm like, we're not, don't conflate it with race, but very clear understanding of different situations where we all agree if you hit someone, it's okay to say sorry, and that's not a big deal.
Regardless of
if you hurt someone's feelings, if you engage in a microaggression, it's okay to say sorry. Like, it shouldn't be this big thing, right? Somebody should be able to say, like, yo, that sounds kind of crazy.
It's okay to say sorry if it was truly unintentional. We put it that way, right? Because sometimes microaggressions are intentional. No one's going to apologize for an intentional microaggression. So that's why I want to make sure I only expect an apology if it's sincere. So if you knew what the hell you was doing and you did it anyway, don't apologize to me.
But is that really a microaggression, or is that just aggression?
I think the microaggression is the smaller act. Right? It's still an aggression, but it's not an overt act. So to take it away from, not overt, it's not a large overt act. So I think the following in the store, y'all do speak English well. I think those are aggressions, but it's a small aggression, right? It doesn't affect your data. It doesn't affect the term or condition of your employment. It doesn't affect how much money you make. It doesn't affect if you can buy a house. It's not systemic in its discriminatory impact, but it still has an impact. And I think that's one of the other things about microaggressions too, that although they may not be large or grandiose acts, it's the accumulation of them over time that has the wearing effect on people. And I think you are correct. It is. So you want to talk about race, and it was Ejima Oluo, who is the author of the book. I want to give her proper
there you go.
Well. But yeah, but I think that is the difference as well, right? So sometimes and I kind of want to turn a corner to, like, why are we talking about microaggressions on a Belonging podcast? I think that is, and then you were kind of going there. If you have been notified that your statement or behavior has a disparate impact or has a negative impact on someone, if you are a leader or a team member or whatever who wants to create cultures of belonging, that's with the self-awareness and at least the grace and empathy to say, hey, that's not what I meant to do. I am so sorry. I think that goes a long way in creating empathy among your teammates and empathy among your family, empathy in belonging in your community, that you have that self-awareness and not be so defensive if it's brought to your attention. I think where the rubber meets the road to continue that is that if you've been put on notice, that thing is being received as discriminatory, stop doing that thing, right? You're not creating a culture of belonging if your response is, oh, I'm sorry that I didn't mean to offend you that way. But that's just you. Everybody else thinks I'm funny and they take it as a joke. That's not the response.
I'm going to keep doing it.
I'm going to keep doing it anyway. I just think you special and you are a social hypochondriac. Everything bothers you. I am not going to change my ways because I offended you, but I am sorry I offended you. You're halfway there. But you haven't really internalized that behavior may be problematic. So I think there is a sense of, as a person who's been alerted that their behavior or their act or their words may be offensive, that you do have, if you generally want to build a relationship, have a good team, create a sense of belonging, you have that. It's your obligation then to kind of analyze that behavior, where it came from, and commit to stop doing that behavior. And also, I think it's the other way around, right? It is if you are the person who is perceiving an action or a statement as being oppressive, you have to find a way to communicate that as well. I think, and your ability to do that depends on the amount of psychological safety that you have on your team or in that situation. And so I think last time we spoke about it, we extended the analogy of walking down the street being hit was what if you're walking down the street with other people, with colleagues, friends, family, and nobody sees you shit happening. And then you flip out. At some point, you would like to believe that if something happened and you're walking, all right, I got hit once. Okay, damn, it's been 3 times now. That you would hope that you have enough psychological safety with your peers, with whoever you're walking down the street with, to say, anybody else noticing this? And you have the ability and the comfort and you feel safe enough in that space to then actually communicate what you're going through and look for some allies in that situation. And part of it could just be a simple, am I tripping? Like maybe everybody's getting hit. Maybe it ain't just me. Or if it is just me, why is it?
Right.
But having the comfort and feeling safe enough to be able to have that discussion is a reflection of the amount of belonging you feel with those people. Right. So,
yes.
So I think that is, if leaders are listening to this and like, why do I care about microaggressions on my team? Because if somebody is suffering in silence with microaggressions, it's going to affect their outcome. It's going to affect their performance and their output with you on that team. And they will eventually become a clock watcher. They're going to be sitting there suffering in silence and really just don't want to enjoy coming to work because they're going to come up with the same dumb stuff every day that they are just tired of dealing with. Right. So we want to create champions who can say, hey, no, I want to be able to either I see something's wrong or I believe that behavior or those statements can be considered as offensive. Let me talk to my colleague about that. Let's kind of nip this in the bud before it happens. Or if you see someone visibly getting upset, are you stepping in to kind of correct that? Those are the kind of things we want to see happening where we have a high level of belonging and psychological safety and challenger safety. Really, as we talk about the different types of psychological safety, that I have enough sense of belonging in that space to say, if I see something wrong, I can challenge it, I can call it out. That's what we want to exhibit on the team. And that should also apply to microaggressions where they happen peer to peer, leader to subordinate, or vendor to peer, whatever it may be, wherever the source is, you want to be able to address that. You as a leader should be able to address that and should address those situations. And you want your team to feel safe enough to bring those things to your attention and or address them on their own in an effective professional way.
So you just covered about 25 things. And I am going to bring us and highlight a couple things. They were all really good points, but I want to bring out a couple things. You first kind of talked about that apology. And yeah, don't be faking your apology. I do want to say, though, if you value people, if you value the other person, whether you agree with it or not, if you value someone, you would hopefully at least be sorry that you hurt them. You may not agree that they should have been hurt. You may not agree that it was hurtful or any of those things. But if you value somebody, and I would hope, especially our leaders who are listening, that you value everyone on your team because everybody does have something to contribute, that you're at least apologizing for the harm that was caused.
Yep.
I think the other thing is taking accountability and having that humility and apologizing doesn't mean you agree with it. And I think sometimes we run into these things. I work with a lot of more conservative cultures and a lot of things come up and they're like, well, I don't agree with that. And I'm never going to be okay with that. Blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. I don't care if you agree with it or not, but fundamentally, I think most of us want to be treated with respect and have respect for other people. And so I may not agree with everything that you do, but I can still value you as a human, as a contributing team member, and as somebody who had the courage enough to tell me that something I did or said resulted in harm. So I want to make that really clear. You don't have to agree with it to be sorry that you hurt somebody. Right? There's a difference there.
It's an emotion of the pain. I get that. Right. Yeah.
Now, if you meant to hurt them, then that's something totally different. Don't apologize for that and just admit that you're the asshole you are. So I think the next one is, I did want to, we talked a little bit about context, and I do enjoy and appreciate the fact that you stressed microaggressions are not just about like the demographics and the historical demographics that have been oppressed. I do also think it's important that as we put things into context. So if I am talking to someone from the South, I remember when I was moving from Baltimore to Atlanta and we stopped in one of those small towns, we were ordering some chicken and I was at the drive-thru and my mom still laughs about this because I'm used to Northern way of ordering things. So I was like, this is what I want. Blah, 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 blah. And the lady was like, oh, hun, just slow down. What are you saying? Like, why are you in such a hurry? And I laughed about it. It was so funny. And that is my horrible impression of a Southern accent.
I was going to call it out. Like, what was that? What voice was that?
Right, clearly, I don't have the Southern accent. But she called me hun. She told me I was in a hurry. She told me, and it wasn't that. It was just that I had moved from where when I ordered my cheesesteak, if I didn't immediately say exactly what I wanted, if I paused to consider if I wanted with or without cheese whiz, I wasn't getting a cheesesteak. So I moved from a very fast-paced culture to a much slower one. And some people might have appreciate, you might be like, that's a microaggression. Why you call me fast? Why you call me hun? Why did you do all of these things? But in the context of where we were, it made total sense. Right. I was in a slower moving, slower paced, where people speak slower, where people call each other, as we already said. And so it is important to also understand, whether you agree with it or not, oppression has existed. And it has existed historically with certain demographic variables. And when we're talking about microaggressions, you should put that context in there as well. Now, whether you think that oppression continues or not continues, we can all agree that there has been oppression in the past, at the very least. And so put it in that context. And that some people are walking around not knowing where you're coming from because of their other experiences outside of interacting with you.
Right. Did I speak that long that you had to take notes?
I did. Yes, I did. Yes, you did speak that long. You didn't speak that long, but you hit so many points. Yeah. The last one is really about how to show up as an ally, right? So I think that one thing about you're walking down the street with a whole group of people and you're getting hit left and right and nobody's noticing. And one, is it safe enough for you to speak up? But I think there's a moment before you speak up that you're probably asking yourself, like, am I truly the only one that sees this? Right. Like, do you not see my arm flying back or my head getting punched? Like, how is it that I am with this group of people that truly doesn't notice? And that in and of itself can sometimes break down some of that psychological safety. To that, I will say, I'm going to tell this story. We were at the International Behavior Analysis Conference this past May. And I wasn't here for this, but I had just walked away from the group when it happened. But there were 5 people. So there were 2 men, 3 women, all Black, standing on the street. And 2 of the women were having a rather heated, they were having a differing of opinions. And so they were very, very involved in their discussion. And one of their husbands was standing with them. And then the other 2 people were a married couple, man and woman. And so as these 2 women are talking, this very large group of all white people with MAGA flags and paraphernalia started walking towards them. And the 3 people who were not talking immediately kind of gave each other a look and perked up a little bit and kind of stood where they were. And from their perspective, there was this moment of we're not moving out of the way because we were here and we're going to stay here. And they made eye contact and the group kind of single filed and moved to the side and walked around. The 2 people talking didn't notice any of this happening. They didn't notice the people in their group look at each other, perk up. They didn't notice 20 people with flags and all this paraphernalia walking by. They noticed none of it because they were so involved in their conversation. And I tell that story because all of us get very involved in our own lives and our own experiences and what is going on. And that doesn't mean that we don't care about the next person. It doesn't mean that we're choosing not to see harms that are being caused. It means that as humans, we are just a little self-centered. Our brains are actually wired to be that way. So just kind of keep that in mind. And I think that the key is when you do speak up, how do people respond?
And I think that's where the empathy and the grace comes in, right? So even if you disagree, I think the key phrase is when you value someone, you should take that time and effort and energy to stop, reflect, do some introspection, hear what they have to say. And does it take time? Yes. There are people who like I'm always on the go. I think very straight point A to point B, very no nonsense, don't emote a lot when I speak, right? So we can talk about thinking styles and communication styles, but that's how I am. Except when I have to pause because I now see that somebody who either something I said has been offensive, and even just on that, your style can be offensive to some people, right? So that could be, for some folks, there are a lot of people that don't like my straight no chaser to the point style. And so I've had to, over time, pull that back when I see that, all right, I'm in the moment. They didn't appreciate that direct answer of no, yes, whatever it is, it's ugly. So now let me stop and kind of figure it out. Right. So again, it's a microaggression. This is not one. So again, if I'm your boss and every day I come in speaking all fast and with short, abrupt, direct answers that in my mind answer the question fully, but in your mind does not, or you didn't like my tone. I've also heard that a lot. Right. Those are all microaggressions that, again, that have nothing to do with race and anything else. It can be about communication style. And that could be a function of the profession I chose, the house I was raised in, the community I was raised in. All those things kind of go into who we are. And so we never know what that is. So what I've had to learn in my professional career, early in my professional career, that you have to stop, pause, take a beat. And you just can't say, well, that's just the way I talk. That's not going to work. If you value that person and their contribution to your team and their contribution to whatever community setting you're in, you really have to stop and check yourself. And I think that's a lot of times if you're the person who has been alerted to a potentially microaggression that you're perpetrating, that you got to check yourself sometimes. Even if you disagree, I know that if I do this in front of her, she's going to respond this way. I don't want her to respond that way, so I'm not going to say it. And that's it. It could be something as simple as, again, I grew up St. Louis. It depends on where you're from. We're not the South, but other people think, y'all's country. Y'all from the South. We're not.
We're not the South.
It's not the South.
I mean, you just saw me try to be Southern, and it didn't work.
It didn't work. But I was still raised by descendants of military drill sergeants. So yes, ma'am, no, ma'am is a thing I grew up with. Yes was half an answer until I got into the professional world. And then I started saying yes, ma'am, at work. And women were like, don't call me ma'am. That's my grandmother. And I am not old enough to be called ma'am.
Right.
My response could not have been and was not, well, that's the way I was raised. So you got to get over it. I'm going to call you ma'am because you're a woman. That would have been inappropriate. Okay. You know what I'm saying? But it can't be the response. You have to change your language, change your approach. Again, to your point, when you value the relationship. And if you're at work, you should value that relationship. You should value the relationship with your neighbors, because if you have a bad neighbor relationship, your life at home will be hell because you're at war with the neighbors across the street, right? So you've got to value those things and those relationships and take the time and effort to at least check yourself, make sure that you're not the problem, you're not the one contributing to the dysfunction. And hopefully, if you can do that and everyone is doing that, we have a better sense of belonging and psychological safety at work.
So we covered a lot here. I'm not going to attempt to recap it all. I think the end point is if you value other people, you will accept the feedback if you have harmed them, and you will try to create spaces where people can speak up freely and without fear of retaliation or negative response if you have said or done something that has resulted in their harm. We've talked specifically about microaggressions. If you forgot the definition, go ahead and rewind and re-listen. And yeah, I think that is most of it.
Yeah, I think it's good. Or again, microaggressions, because they're not going to rewind. Intentional or unintentional subtle acts or statements that can be regarded as offensive or discriminatory. So we'll just call it that. We'll put it somewhere in one of our posts when we do it. So I think that we can do some updates in the social media. But I think that is a great place to stop. Good recap of the episode. And just we'll end it how we always end it. Remember, great leadership starts with belonging.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Belonging at the Top. We hope it sparked new ideas for fostering belonging in your leadership journey. If you found it insightful, please like and subscribe to our podcast for more thought-provoking discussions. We'd also love it if you could share it with others who might benefit from the conversation. If you have any feedback or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please email us or drop us a note on Instagram